Good evening and welcome to Trailblazers of the Caribbean. Thank you for your very encouraging and sincere comments about the show. This evening, a man who began life a normal human being, growing up on an indentured estate in Kelly Village, Carney, and with the normal passion to overcome the difficulties of the plantation environment, in the course of which he would become physically challenged. Employee, shopkeeper, supermarket owner, businessman, his only handicap was time. Time to achieve many of the plans he'd cultivated during his earlier life. I'm indeed happy to invite to the Trailblazer set Harry Supnarayan, whom the country recognizes as a perfect example of an individual who's transformed adversity into opportunity, by virtue of which his life has become an example worthy of emulation. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I don't think it's an easy task to find someone in 2006 who knows the indentureship story. In this regard, I feel that we're very honored and very privileged to have you sit and talk a little bit about that experience.
I would consider it very fortunate of me to have lived obliquely opposite the Hermitage Estate, and that is obliquely opposite to the barracks where the indentured Indians lived. And I can still remember names like Mr. Erna and Mr. Naidu and Mr. Sankaram and some of these people. And it was pathetic, very pathetic, to have seen the inhumane conditions under which they lived. They existed on the extreme minimum of anything at all. They slept on the floor in the barracks. They had little or no, I don't remember any one of them having a bed. One person I remember had a sort of a wooden table, maybe 1 foot off the ground, and he had the jute bags, the rice bags and the sugar bags, and he stuffed it with dry grass, and he laid it on that, and he slept on that, and that was his bed. And it was difficult to understand how inhumane the treatment was, especially when it came to their work. They got a minimum wage, most likely about, if I would remember it, about 20 or 24 cents a day.
24
somewhere
cents.
About 24 cents a day. And it was really not very encouraging to see the overseers and the managers who overlook them would deduct money out of that 24 cents for any slight error they made in digging a drain or cutting something. And it was really pathetic. And
now, some people believe that these stories are somewhat exaggerated. The inhumanity meted out to these indentured immigrants, as indeed the slaves. Some people feel that they do not tell the true story, but you bore witness to some of these things. What examples would you tell us in terms of that humanity of which you speak?
There was no exaggeration. I've never met any story told about the indentured Indians from India, or I've never met anything that was less than the truth. Of all the stories told on many occasions, at many functions, the Diwali Nagar and some of these functions, the stories, I think they are cushioned. The reality of the situation is I lived with them. As a little boy, I slept in the barracks with them. And, you know, I don't remember any one of them having a pair of shoes. They had something which they made out of wood called the sapat.
The sapat, yes.
Or the sabot. And then after that, they would use the bicycle tires or rubber. And they'll make a sapat out of the rubber and the wood. And the jigger was another thing. Have you ever heard about jigger?
Oh yes, oh yes.
And jigger was an infestation, especially in the dry season, when they walked on the dirt. I myself had jiggers, I remember. I don't remember having shoes to go to school in those days. Maybe when I got to the primary stage, okay, fine, yes. But as a boy, I myself grew up in the estates, and I grew up without shoes. And these people lived under very, very extreme conditions. There's no question about that.
How did you interact with them? You said that you slept in the barracks.
Yes.
Was this of your own doing?
Well, I lived opposite the barracks, so they were very accommodating. They were very friendly, and we would go across in the barracks and we'd play in the barracks. And one thing I really could not cope with, the white man, or the massa, if you call him the massa, he had his place so protected that we as children, not even us, we could not come anywhere close to his offices or the main building. We had to go around. There was a road, a trace made for us to go around. None of the workers were allowed. The workers never were allowed to get anywhere close to that except on the fortnight when they came for their measly pay. And all those things, those things are seeing the conditions under which they live is what motivated me to determine myself not to be one who would live under those conditions. And I think that was the driving force in my moving forward.
So what about the language? There must have been a barrier between yourself growing up as a little boy and the language they spoke, because my understanding of those people who lived on the Hermitage estate were the Tamils mainly. So they spoke Telugu.
That's right, yes.
How did you interface with them?
They spoke Telugu, yes, but they spoke Telugu. They spoke a sort of a broken Hindi, or I think you call it Bhojpur.
Bhojpuri.
Ina ba aise kareke, una da acha ba kareke, hiya khel, hua khel, aise na kare, aise na karo. And that sort of, I got that from them, So it was fun, because they spoke English to a certain extent. We were able
so they were able to explain themselves.
Yes, definitely.
One of the things that many people relate is the fact that though the stories would tell of people who came here as indentured immigrants, they were not educated, the stories would be told, they were backward, and all sorts of negatives. But your experience has been different, because perhaps the only benefit they didn't have was that of the English language, but they brought their culture, and they brought things that they would have taught you. As you said earlier on, it is the difficulty that you saw in the estate and the barrack house in particular that motivated your own life. What would they have taught you?
Well, I learned from them the determination and the will to move forward, and they were not all that illiterate as one would want to think. They had their books and they read. I would sit there and hear them read their Telugu and their Madras. I remember Mr. Kamachi reading his book, and I did not understand much of it. I did not understand any end of it. But I mean, they read their books, and they came here with their religion and their language, and that they never sacrificed.
Was it only a question of Indian immigrants at the Hermitage estate, or were there other people of other ethnicities who'd come from different places? Like, for instance, not all of the slaves abandoned the estate. Some stayed on. There were the Portuguese, the Chinese, the people from the West Indian islands who came. So I'm asking the question, were there other people on the Hermitage estate in Kelly Village?
Yes, there were. I remember there were Portuguese, there were Africans, and today we have this sort of ethnic divide in our community. And even the politics of the country seem to have some sort of relationship to the ethnic divide. But in those days, the Africans and the Indians lived together as one. I remember people like Mr. Simon, people like Mr. Norman, who were Africans, and they spoke Hindi like anybody else. And they were very versed on it. I remember that very clearly as a little boy. And I do not remember anywhere along the line where there was any sort of ill feeling between the two races, or even the Portuguese themselves.
The estate, the Hermitage estate, was owned by a Portuguese, was it not?
I would think so. I
Yes.
think it was owned by one Mr. Herrera, if I remember.
Because the Portuguese had come from Madeira Island.
Okay.
And I think, according to the history, they came before the Indians came in 1845. But I want to go to a piece of video that's 10 years old,
Okay.
which will begin in earnest the discussion that we're having this evening on the Trailblazers. Harry Suknarine this evening. It's our honor, it's our pleasure to talk with him. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Trailblazers of the Caribbean this evening, Mr. Harry Suknarine. I'd like to take you back to a 10-year-old video in which a lot of the story we plan to deal with tonight is told. Let's go to that video.
Harry Diosaran Pusad Suknarine, Governing Director in the sphere of business.
A very proud moment for Mr. Suknarine. He's well known for his keen business sense. It is this intuition that led him to pioneer in the field of printing. The establishment of Cariflex brought with it the first flexographic press in the Caribbean, a first indeed. Harry Crete was another brainchild of Mr. Suknarine. Originally, the company was formed to provide the construction industry with cement in bags to which could be added sand and water. Out of these two success stories came an opportunity to give back to the community.
This award represents the hard work and dedication of my staff. Through me, the National Awards Committee pays tribute to them, without whom my vision would have been only an ambitious dream.
Perhaps the most visible recipient of the National Awards ceremony on Independence Day. Harry Suknarine's pacemaker races him to this auspicious date with President Arthur N.R. Robinson, who pins a Hummingbird gold medal on his chest. He was among 6 nationals and 2 organizations honored by the state for loyal and devoted service to Trinidad and Tobago in the field of human endeavor. The award pays tribute to the men and women of our land who've given of their time and energies in the creation of a total quality nation, especially those who invent opportunities out of despair and challenge themselves to higher ideals, even in their darkest moments. Once a young and energetic man, full of life and heroism, Harry Suknarine's claim to fame is not the success of his multi-million-dollar printing or concrete business, but his abiding faith in the power of positive thinking and his tremendous confidence in Norman Peale, not just an author on the subject, but a philosopher who has guided his life and influenced his decisions. His tribute to the staff at Cariflex and Harry Crete bears testimony to a strong inward belief that productivity begins with motivation.